Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created this show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, we provide the knowledge, skills, insight, inspiration, and encouragement you need to find your happy. Hello there, lawyers. So I am trying something a little bit new today, and I'm going to have Mr. Happy Lawyer Project on the show with me, and we're going to be giving you a little update about what I've been up to and what's coming up in the show. So, hey Dave, how are you?
I'm great. Excited to be back on the show. How's it going?
Life is good. So as you guys may know, if you follow me on Instagram, we just got back from vacation. We were in Southeast Asia for about 2.5 weeks. We did Singapore, Malaysia, Bali. We also were in New York last week. So it's been a wonderful summer for us here in the Happy Lawyer family. A couple things in that respect is that we've also started travel hacking, which a lot of you have asked me about, and I'm going to bring somebody on the show to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm really excited to dive more into travel. And part of what has encouraged this new passion is the fact that I paid off all of my student loans. So that has been super, super exciting. And I'll talk more about that later in the show, but that's part of the reason we have this newfound money to spend on travel, and we're really excited about that. So, a little update about the show. I get a lot of questions for you guys, and I don't unfortunately have the time to answer all of them. So what I wanted to try today is a short Q&A episode where I get to answer some listener questions that kind of represent questions that I get a lot that I think would be helpful to a lot of people. So we can dive right in. Dave's here to help me read the questions and kind of chime in to make sure that I don't get too far off track talking about stuff that isn't super helpful for you guys. So we're going to give this a shot. You ready, Dave?
Absolutely. So the first question comes from Jasmine on LinkedIn, and she asks, how do you know which practice areas to pursue and how to convince decision makers you can do the job? I know I pick things up quickly. That's what we do as lawyers, research, law, and apply. I am doing pro bono and plan to write and publish more, but what else can we as lawyers do?
I think this is a really good question, and I think a lot of people wonder how to decide which area of law they should pursue. And I want to reassure you guys that for most lawyers, it really is hard to quote unquote know. It's hard to know something with absolute certainty that you've never done before. And ultimately, your career is going to be really long. So you don't have to quote unquote know which area of law you're going to like or that you're going to be good at. You just have to kind of make a directional decision about what you want to learn more about. And I think that as a starting point, you need to be having a lot of really in-depth conversations with lawyers about their experiences and not just the work, but everything that goes with the work. What is the lifestyle that they lead? What are the characteristics of a lawyer that is going to be successful in that field? I think that we have these assumptions that all lawyers do certain core skills, and I think largely that's true. But then there's all of this other stuff that we don't really get into. For example, how do you like your work to be distributed? Are you somebody who likes the predictability of regular work schedule? So for example, would you rather work, 9 to 8 every day for the foreseeable future? Or are you somebody who wouldn't mind working kind of all-nighters and really pushing really hard on something if you know that at other times in the year, things are going to be fairly slow? These are the types of things that you only learn by having conversations and really getting to know yourself and your work style better, and not making assumptions about what it's like to work in any certain practice area. So to that point, I think it's important to be able to assess your skill set and your disposition and your own preferences with respect to lifestyle. These are all priorities and they shouldn't be taken for granted. I don't think you can necessarily fit yourself into something that doesn't align with who you are. And when you're trying to have this conversation with a potential employer or somebody who you're looking to employ you, you need to be able to make the connection between what you've now learned about what that job entails and who you are and how you're going to be a good fit for that job. I often cringe when interviewing people because I feel like there's that disconnect. They haven't done the work to understand the job, and they say things that just don't resonate and show me that they haven't done their homework in preparing for the interview. So if you can go into an interview and demonstrate that who you are and what the job is are a good fit, you're going to always do really well. And there's 3 other characteristics that I think no matter what area you want to practice are really important for a young lawyer. And that's going to be showing that you have good judgment, that you have the confidence to convince people that you know what you're doing, and really to be intellectually curious about the practice of law. I want to work with people who care about the work that they're doing and are interested in learning more, because that means that I'm not going to have to go out of my way to push them because they're going to be internally driven to grow as a young professional. So Jasmine also mentioned that I think she said that she's writing and doing pro bono. I think those are both really good things, but you need to act strategically. You need to figure out where the people that you want to work with and for hang out. Whether that's physically or virtually, there's no point doing pro bono or working unless you enjoy it. Obviously, you should always do things if you enjoy it, because I think that that's going to lead to success. But if you're trying to figure out amongst the things that you could potentially do, which ones to pick amongst things you would enjoy, you should pick the things that align with the people whom you most respect and who you think work in an area that you're interested in. And one last thing I want to point out is in her question, and this may have just been, semantics, but you need to remember that you're not trying to convince anybody that you can do the job. What you're trying to do is show them that you are, in fact, the best person for the job. So I hope that helps. And let me know how the job hunt goes, Jasmine.
All right. That was great. The next question comes from Rachel, who DM'd on Instagram, and she's starting out her career as a big law attorney. Rachelle asked what she can do to set herself up for her financial future. You're going to go nuts on this question, right?
So this is partly why I had Dave here. You guys know I love personal finance, and I could go on for hours about this. So I just wanted to make sure that not only I didn't go on for too long, but that I didn't get too in the weeds. As I already mentioned at the top of the show, we recently paid off all of our student loans, and between the two of us, that's going to be almost $400,000 in student loans, including the interest and things like that, which we were able to do in just 5.5 years. And while that's not unheard of in big law, I think the thing that is really important to mention is that we managed to do this while going on a lot of vacations because we love to travel. Over the last 5.5 years, we've been to the Maldives, we've been to Sri Lanka, we've been to Puerto Rico, Antigua, Barbados, and I mean, the list really does go on. We really do prioritize travel. We've also had 2 kids, as you guys know, and invested in real estate. We have 4 rental units that we manage. And today, just 5.5 years later, we have 0 personal debt. That means no mortgage, no student loans, no car payments. We have no consumer debt, and we're on target to be completely financially independent within the next 5 years. And I don't say any of this to impress you guys. That's not the point, but I really want to impress upon you what is possible with a little thoughtfulness and discipline. So I'm going to get in the weeds a little here for you guys who are financially minded. And I'm going to try and go slowly and stay really high level, but I am going to give you guys numbers because I do think that's helpful to understand how it all works in practice. So there's a few basic rules by which I live. 1, maxing out my 401k every year. Compounding interest is just such a force in growing your wealth. And I think that those years early in your career, you can't afford to not be investing in your long-term future. I always paid at least the minimum on all my loans. I built that into my budget from the start. That was always non-negotiable. And then I chose housing that never accounted for more than a third of my paycheck. And we didn't, live in like a basement with no windows. We lived quite comfortably in a perfectly decent 2-bedroom in Park Slope in Brooklyn, New York. So we were able to do that while sticking to a budget. So let me dive into the numbers a little, and then we'll touch a little bit on all the other stuff that might be on your minds. So back then, the starting salary for a first-year associate was $160,000. So then you back out the $18,000 401k max contribution, and you take that out before taxes. And then once you calculate paying taxes and all of that, you end up with about $90,000 a year in money you're going to see in your paycheck. So once you take 33% of that for housing, that meant that we could spend about $2,500 a month on rent. And then the next rule we had was that with the remaining 66%, I would split that between living cost and savings. So ultimately, what that means is you have about $2,500 left for savings and $2,500 for living. And I know people often have this conversation about whether you should be saving when you have student loans or whether you should be throwing all of your money towards student loans. And what I would say to that is that you need to have that emergency fund and that cushion. And then once you have that cushion, that $2,500 can start going towards student loans if you so choose. You really have to decide kind of what your priorities are. And the way you decide what your emergency fund should be is, I would say it should be about 6 months of living expenses. A couple of other considerations is I'm not a budgeter. So I never budget or track how much money I'm spending. That doesn't really work for me. I don't like the constraints of a budget. Instead, what I do is I automate everything. So when I get paid each month, all of my savings automatically go to their respective accounts or investments, and then I'm free to spend whatever's left. And then because I spend everything on a credit card, that kind of builds in a little bit of buffer time because things don't come automatically due. And so I can make adjustments if I'm overspending, and if I underspend, I know I have a little extra money. A couple of you may also wonder about Dave's income, because obviously Dave was working during this time and bringing in income, but I didn't include it in this conversation today because I would say his income predominantly was spent on his own, cell phone and bills, transportation to work, clothing, as well as his student loans. So it didn't really account for my spend or, communal spend, because I was making substantially more money than him. The way we always thought about it was that I made the money and he was my counterbalance and did good in the world. So he had a nonprofit philanthropic job, which made, us as a couple, I think, quite powerful. Another thing to think about is the Social Security bump. For those of you who are new or who aren't that into money, basically the way Social Security payments make is it's a percentage of your income up to a threshold. So I think the number is about $118,000 right now. So for the first $118,000 a year that you make, they take out about 6% of your income to put towards Social Security. So each year at some point you hit that max, and after that point, you get the 6% in your paycheck. And for me, that money always goes to student loans. And because you get paid more and more each year, that time period will start earlier and earlier in the year, and that money can get thrown towards student loans. Another thing that's important to mention is that as your loan to debt ratio increases, you should also consider refinancing your loans if you have high interest rates. I came out of law school when interest rates were kind of insane. I think that my Department of Education loans were at 8.5%, which is astronomical, especially considering I had, $250,000 of student loans. So once my debt to income ratio got better, I went to SoFi and I refinanced my loans, and ultimately I was able to get them down to about 4%, 3.5%, which is a huge savings and lets you kind of attack that student loan much more aggressively. And just by way of background, your debt to income ratio is what banks look at to determine your credit worthy. One of the many things banks look at to determine your credit worthiness and what kind of interest rate you can get. And basically, when most of us start working, we have way more debt than how much we make, which obviously doesn't make us look like a good risk. So once you hit that flip where all of a sudden you're making more money than you have in debt, that's a great time to consider refinancing your loans because you're going to get a much better rate. I will also note that we spent 6 months in that first year at an international office of my firm. Back then, and I know this doesn't always happen anymore, but back then, when you stayed at an international office, you would receive a cost of living adjustment. Basically, this was extra money that you would get to account for the inconveniences that come with living abroad, is basically the way it's thought about. And I think part of the reason that's gone away is because people are so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Keen to travel.
Yes. People are so keen to travel that they no longer need to provide that cost of living adjustment in order to get people to take those opportunities. But one of the things that we did get was they did pay for our housing for 6 months. So that automatically was another $2,500, for 6 months that we could put towards student loans. That being said, we were in one of the most expensive cities in the world, more expensive even than New York, I would say. And so, it was like a beer was like $20 sometimes. It was insane. So with that in mind, we definitely did spend some money. But, keep in mind when you're thinking about all these things that obviously salaries have gone up considerably in the last 8 years, as have bonuses. So for your reference, my first year bonus was a prorated on $2,500. So after taxes, I got about $700. So, for whatever it's worth, I think that it's still really possible to make a significant dent in your student loans in that first year, even if you don't go abroad. But if you're someone who's interested and there are opportunities, it is a fantastic way to save money, to get really good experience, and to pay off those loans or, do whatever you want to do with that increased disposable income. And speaking of bonuses, I would add that my general rule about bonuses is that 20% of the bonus is mine to spend and the other 80% goes towards loans. So that's at a very high level how we've managed our finances over the last, 8+ years and how we were able to tackle our loans so quickly. There's so much more that I could go into as respect to how I invest my money and all of that other stuff and a lot of the strategic decisions we've made along the way. But I think that's probably more than enough to get you guys started. And I feel like these rules of thumbs have served me really well. And they're not going to work for everybody, but I developed these based on hundreds and hundreds of hours of reading books, listening to podcasts, interviewing experts, some degree of trial and error. But I'm obviously not a financial professional. So if you guys want to play around with these numbers and try them out for yourself, Josh Holt from the Big Law Investor, who was on the show in episode 36, he has a great article where he goes into way more detail about how you could budget a first year salary. And he does it, I think he updated it for the raises. I know he updated it for the 180 raise. I'm not sure if he updated it for the 190 raise. But he also has this fantastic Excel spreadsheet that you can download and you can put in your own numbers and figure out what would work for your circumstance. And I have to give a shout out to Josh because he is now so legit that 2 weeks ago, Tim Ferriss linked to one of his articles in his weekly Friday email, which is super exciting for us in the content creation legal space. So you guys should check out Josh's work. He's fantastic. And it also goes without saying that, a lot of what we've talked about today works in the big law context. And I would love to chat with you guys about other circumstances and other financial situations. So if you guys have other questions and you want to share with me your situation, I would love to get into any and all of those details here on the show or through email. Feel free to share. I think that's it.
Yep.
Is there anything else that I should mention about money, about how we spend our money or manage our money?
No, I think just being the other half of the team and not the financially minded one. I would add that doing long-term financial planning like this for loans when you're in a partnership really works better if there is a lot of open communication about expectations and plans and how well it's going sticking to the plan. We managed to get pretty far before we started doing our weekly family business meeting. But for me, that was a big help in doing my part to get us across the finish line. So that's just like a little asterisk, is like as you grow in your relationships and perhaps enter into a serious partnership, that, money is tough. Everyone has their own money relationship with themselves, and it impacts how they relate to one another. So, just keep it open, honest, clear, friendly, and it should hopefully, if you have a good strategy in place, you'll get there.
Yeah, I manage kind of the money and the money plan in our family, and we didn't start talking about it on a weekly basis until probably the last couple of years. I'd say 2 years now. Before that, we used to talk about it on a monthly basis. And I would say that part of the reason we started talking about it weekly was as part of our move down to Texas, we were really committed to doing the final push. A lot of the reason we made the move was to increase our cash flow. And I just didn't want to come down here and have made such a drastic change to our lives and then not accomplish that goal. And so in order to stay focused, we have a weekly meeting where we talk about how it's going, what kind of changes we need to make, if any, and how we're both feeling about the plan. So that's a great point, Dave. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. Thanks for being the money person.
So if you guys enjoyed this format and enjoyed hearing a little bit more from me personally, let me know and I will try to do more of these episodes. The best way to ask me a question or reach me is to email me at Okoma, OKEOMA, at thehappylawyerproject.com. You can also DM me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or leave me a voicemail on the website. There's a little widget on the side of the homepage, on all the pages, I think. And if you go click on it, it'll let you just record right onto the site. You can do it on your phone. I would love to get more of you on the show. So if you're so inclined to leave me a voicemail, I'm going to tell you now that I'll play it on the show and I'll try to answer your question. I think that's all I got. So as always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.